The discovery at Neptune's edge. The research vessel Horizon drifted silently through the outer reaches of Neptune's orbital path, its hull gleaming under the distant starlight. Lieutenant Renata Valdez stood at the observation deck, her dark eyes fixed on the endless expanse of space before her. The ship's mission was simple: study the unusual energy signatures that had been emanating from this sector for the past 3 months. "Lieutenant, you might want to see this," called out Navigation Officer Thomas Reed, his voice carrying a hint of uncertainty that immediately caught Renata's attention. She made her way to his station, where the sensor readings showed something she'd never encountered before. "It's organic," Reed explained, adjusting the scanning frequency. "But the energy signature, it's unlike anything in our database." The object in question was small, barely larger than a shuttle pod, and appeared to be drifting aimlessly through space. Captain Diana Winston joined them, her weathered face creasing with concern as she studied the readings. "Launch a recovery drone," she ordered. "Whatever it is, it's still alive." The next few hours were a blur of activity. The recovery team, led by Dr. Patel, worked meticulously to bring the mysterious object aboard. When they finally managed to get it into the containment bay, everyone present fell silent. Floating in a crystalline pod was a creature that defied description. Its body seemed to shift between solid and translucent, with patterns of light flowing beneath what appeared to be its skin. 2 large, iridescent eyes opened slowly, regarding them with an intelligence that sent shivers down Renata's spine. "It's beautiful," Dr. Patel whispered, approaching the pod carefully. "And look at these markings. This isn't a natural formation. Someone made this pod." The creature pressed a limb against the crystal, leaving traces of bioluminescent light where it touched. Renata felt drawn to it, sensing no malice in its gentle movements. Captain Winston ordered a full analysis of both the pod and its occupant, but maintained strict quarantine protocols. Over the next few days, Dr. Patel and his team made remarkable discoveries. The pod appeared to be a form of stasis chamber, designed to preserve its occupant during long-duration space travel. The creature, which they began calling Nova due to its star-like glow, showed signs of severe trauma before being placed in stasis. Someone was trying to protect it, Renata observed, watching Nova interact with the various scanning devices they introduced into its chamber. But from what? Her question was answered sooner than anyone expected. The ship's long-range sensors detected 3 vessels approaching at high speed, their configurations unlike anything in Earth's database. Captain Winston immediately ordered battle stations. "They're not responding to hails," Communications Officer Zhang reported, her fingers dancing across her console. "But they're broadcasting something. It's a demand for surrender and the immediate transfer of biological asset 093. Renata looked at Nova, who had pressed itself against the far side of its pod, trembling visibly. The patterns of light beneath its skin had dimmed considerably, and she could swear she felt waves of fear emanating from the creature. "Captain," she said, turning to Winston, "we can't give it to them." Winston nodded grimly. "Agreed. Whatever Nova is, it clearly doesn't want to go with them. Mr. Reed, plot us a course through the Kuiper Belt debris field. Dar. Patel, see if you can stabilize Nova's pod for emergency maneuvering. We're not surrendering anyone today." As the Horizon prepared for what might be the first human engagement with hostile alien forces, Renata couldn't help but feel that they had stumbled upon something far bigger than a simple research mission. Nova's presence had sparked a chain of events that would change humanity's understanding of their place in the universe. The creature's eyes met hers through the crystal, and in that moment, she understood with perfect clarity that protecting Nova wasn't just about saving one life, it was about standing up for what humanity believed in: compassion, justice, and the fundamental right of all beings to live free from fear and oppression. As the hostile ships drew closer, the crew of the Horizon prepared for battle, united in their resolve to protect their mysterious new passenger, whatever the cost might be. Echoes of ancient knowledge. The horizon plunged deeper into the Kuiper belt, using the ancient ice formations and space debris as cover. Inside the ship's research lab, Dr. Patel worked feverishly to decode the strange symbols etched into Nova's stasis pod, while Lieutenant Renata Valdez kept watch over their unusual guest. "There's a pattern here," Dr. Patel muttered, his fingers tracing the glowing inscriptions. "These aren't just decorative markings, they're a form of data storage." He adjusted his instruments, trying to capture the subtle variations in the crystal's luminescence. Each symbol seems to shift slightly when Nova's emotional state changes. Renata noticed it too. Whenever Nova became agitated, certain markings would pulse with increased intensity. The creature had begun mimicking their movements, showing an remarkable ability to learn and adapt. But more striking was its apparent attempt to communicate through patterns of light that rippled across its translucent form. "Captain to Lab 1, Winston's voice crackled over the intercom. "The pursuit vessels are holding position at the belt's edge. They're transmitting again." Communications Officer Zhang's voice followed. "They're calling themselves the Harvesters. They claim Nova is—" She paused, her voice tightening, "their property. A biological weapon they engineered." Nova's reaction was immediate and visceral. The creature recoiled, its previously gentle lights turning sharp and erratic. The temperature in its pod dropped dramatically, frost forming on the crystal surface. "That's a lie," Renata stated firmly, watching Nova's distress. "Look at its response. This isn't some weapon. It's terrified of them." Dr. Patel's equipment suddenly began picking up new signals. The symbols on the pod were changing, revealing previously hidden patterns. "These markings. They're becoming clearer. It's like Nova's emotional response triggered something." He worked quickly to record the new data. "Wait, these aren't Harvester symbols at all. This is something much older." As they studied the emerging patterns, Navigator Reed's voice came through the intercom. "Multiple impacts detected on the belt's outer edge. They're using some kind of energy weapon to clear a path through the debris." Captain Winston's response was immediate. "All hands, battle stations." "Dar. Patel, what have you found?" The scientist's eyes were wide with excitement despite the tension. "Captain, according to these readings, Nova belongs to a species called the Luminarii. They were a race of energy beings who once helped maintain peace across this sector of space. The pod's data suggests they were nearly wiped out by the Harvesters, who sought to weaponize their natural abilities." Nova pressed against the pod's crystal wall, its lights forming patterns that matched some of the ancient symbols. Dr. Patel's translation software began processing the signals, and broken phrases appeared on his screen: "Help. Last of kind. Must not return." Renata placed her hand against the pod's surface, and Nova's lights synchronized with her body's electrical field. A wave of emotions flooded her mind: fear, hope, and a desperate need to prevent something terrible from happening. "They're not just after Nova," she gasped, the psychic connection fading but leaving her with crystal-clear understanding. "The pod contains the genetic legacy of the entire Luminarii species. If the Harvesters get it, they could create an army of living weapons," Captain Winston finished grimly. "Not on my watch. Dr. Patel, can you interface with the pod systems? We need to understand what we're protecting." As Dr. Patel worked, Nova began sharing more information through its light patterns. The Luminarii had been peaceful explorers, using their abilities to facilitate communication and understanding between different species. But their power to influence emotions and energy fields had drawn the attention of the Harvesters, a militant species obsessed with biological weaponry. The pod contained not just Nova, but the means to potentially restore the Luminarii species, if it could reach a safe haven. The last survivors had launched multiple pods, each containing a piece of their civilization's knowledge and genetic material. Nova was a guardian, chosen to protect this legacy until it could be safely recovered. A violent shudder ran through the ship. They're getting closer, Zhang reported. 3 more vessels just dropped out of faster-than-light travel. They're boxing us in. Captain Winston's voice remained steady. All crews, prepare for emergency maneuvers. We're not giving up without a fight. As the crew rushed to their stations, Renata looked at Nova, whose lights had formed into a complex pattern she somehow understood. It's showing us a way out, she said, quickly transferring the coordinates to navigation. There's a region of space the harvesters can't follow, something about their technology doesn't work there. How convenient, Winston replied, but her tone was thoughtful rather than skeptical. Mr. Reed, plot a course to those coordinates. All hands, secure for high-G maneuvers. We're about to show these harvesters why you don't threaten a human vessel or its passengers. The Horizon's engines roared to life, and as they prepared to make their daring escape, Renata realized that Nova had given them more than just coordinates, it had given them hope. The creature's trust in them, despite all it had suffered, reminded her of humanity's greatest strength, the will to stand up for what was right, no matter the odds. Hunters in the dark. The Horizon thundered through space, pushing its engines to their limits as it followed Nova's mysterious coordinates. Behind them, the harvester ships unleashed a barrage of energy weapons that lit up the void like artificial lightning. The human vessel's shields strained under the assault, but held firm. Navigator Reed's hands flew across his console, making minute adjustments to their course. We're approaching the coordinate point, but these readings don't make sense. It's like there's a fold in space ahead of us. Dr. Patel burst onto the bridge, his tablet displaying rapidly changing data streams. Captain, Nova's showing me something incredible. The Luminari didn't just travel through space, they could manipulate it. We're heading for one of their ancient sanctuaries. Captain Winston gripped her command chair as another blast rocked the ship. Zhang, ship status? Shields at 40%, Zhang reported, her voice tight with tension. 2 more harvester ships just dropped out of FTL behind us. They're launching some kind of boarding pods. Security teams to all critical sections, Winston ordered. Lieutenant Valdez, get to the lab and protect Nova. If they want our guests so badly, they'll have to fight for it. Renata sprinted through the corridors, the ship's artificial gravity fluctuating under the continued assault. When she reached the lab, she found Nova's pod pulsing with intense light. The creature had arranged itself into a complex geometric pattern, its bioluminescence synchronized with the pod's ancient markings. It's trying to tell us something, Dr. Patel's voice came through her communicator. The sanctuary ahead, it's not just a hiding place. It's a Luminari outpost. Nova's kind built a network of these throughout the galaxy, but they're invisible unless you know exactly where to look. A violent explosion rocked the ship. Hull breach on Deck C. Zhang's voice crackled through the ship-wide comm, harvesters have boarded. Security teams engaging. The sound of weapon fire echoed through the corridors. Renata drew her sidearm, positioning herself between Nova's pod and the lab entrance. The creature's lights dimmed, as if trying to make itself less visible, but its fear was palpable. Through their strange connection, Renata felt Nova trying to share more information. Images flashed through her mind, vast chambers of living crystal, repositories of knowledge, and something else, a weapon, but not like anything the harvesters could imagine. A way to turn their own biological manipulation against them. Dr. Patel, she called urgently into her comm, Nova's showing me something about the sanctuary. It's not just a hiding place, it's an arsenal. The Luminari left something there that could stop the harvesters. The ship shuddered again, more violently this time. Through the lab's viewport, Renata saw a strange distortion in space, like reality itself was folding inward. The horizon was approaching the sanctuary's entrance. Multiple hostiles approaching the lab. Security Chief Rodriguez's voice warned through the comm, "We're trying to hold them back, but their armor's resistant to our weapons. Renata could hear the fighting getting closer. The harvester's heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors, accompanied by an alien clicking sound that made her skin crawl. She glanced at Nova, who had pressed itself against the side of the pod closest to her, its lights pulsing in a pattern that somehow conveyed both trust and determination. The lab doors burst open. 3 harvester soldiers charged in, their biomechanical armor making them look more machine than living being. Their weapons were unlike anything Renata had seen, living tissue merged with technology in a grotesque display of their species' obsession with biological manipulation. Renata's training kicked in. She fired precisely, aiming for the gaps in their armor where organic matter was exposed. One harvester fell, its armor spasming as its biological components failed. But the others kept coming. Suddenly, Nova's pod erupted with brilliant light. The harvesters staggered, their biomechanical systems going haywire under the creature's energy pulse. Renata seized the opportunity, taking down another attacker. The third raised its weapon, but security teams arrived just in time, overwhelming it with concentrated fire. The sanctuary entrance is stabilizing, Reed's voice announced ship-wide. But the harvester ships are still on our tail. They're not giving up. Captain Winston's response was immediate. All hands, prepare for emergency maneuvers. We're going in. The horizon plunged toward the spatial distortion. The view through the lab's viewport became impossible to comprehend as normal space gave way to something else entirely. The pursuing harvester ships fired desperately, trying to stop them before they could escape. Nova's lights formed new patterns, and Renata understood they were entering something like a tunnel through space itself, a path that only the Luminarii knew how to navigate. The harvesters' weapons began to affect them strangely, their energy dispersing harmlessly across the dimensional boundary. We're through. Reed announced triumphantly. The harvesters, their ships can't follow. Their technology won't function in here. As the horizon emerged into a space that defied normal physics, with streams of energy flowing like rivers through the void, Renata felt Nova's relief washing over her. But mixed with that relief was purpose. They had escaped immediate danger, but they had also found something the Luminarii had left behind, something that could change the course of this conflict forever. Captain, Renata called, her voice firm with resolve, Nova wants to show us something. I think we're about to find out why the harvesters are really so desperate to capture it. In the strange light of the sanctuary, Nova's pod began to pulse with new patterns, revealing secrets that had been hidden for centuries. The real battle, Renata realized, was just beginning. Breaking the chains. The horizon drifted through the otherworldly expanse of the Luminarii sanctuary, surrounded by streams of living light that pulsed in harmony with Nova's bioluminescence. The ship sensors struggled to make sense of their environment, where the normal rules of physics seemed more like gentle suggestions. Captain Winston had ordered the ship to full stop while they assessed their situation. In the research lab, Dr. Patel worked frantically to interpret the massive amount of data flowing from Nova's pod. The ancient markings had transformed into complex, moving patterns that seemed to tell the story of an entire civilization. It's remarkable, he breathed, watching as his translation software struggled to keep up. The Luminarii weren't just peaceful explorers, they were guardians. They used their abilities to maintain balance in the galaxy, preventing any one species from becoming too powerful. Renata watched as Nova pressed against its pod, its light synchronizing with the sanctuary's energy streams. Through their connection, she felt the creature's urgent need to share something crucial. They're showing me more, she said, closing her eyes to focus on the images flowing into her mind. The harvesters, they weren't always like this. They were changed. Dr. Patel's equipment suddenly picked up new readings. The pod's internal systems are activating. I think Nova's trying to access something. The pod's crystal surface began to ripple like liquid, revealing hidden compartments filled with what looked like strands of solid light. Nova's form shifted, stretching out to touch each strand, causing them to pulse with information. "Captain to the lab," Renata called through the comm, "you need to see this." When Captain Winston arrived, accompanied by Security Chief Rodriguez, the lab had transformed. Holographic displays filled the air, showing scenes from the past, the luminarii in their prime, their cities of living crystal floating through space, their work to guide younger species toward peaceful cooperation. And then came the darkness. The images showed the arrival of something ancient and malevolent, a force that corrupted everything it touched. The harvesters had been its first victims, transformed from a species of brilliant biological researchers into twisted weapons of war. Their obsession with biological manipulation wasn't natural, it was programmed into them by something that wanted to use them as tools for conquest. The luminarii fought back, Renata narrated, interpreting Nova's memories. They found a way to reverse the corruption, to free species from its influence. But the force behind it all discovered their plan. That's why they were hunted to near extinction. Nova's lights pulsed urgently, and new information flooded the displays. The pod contained more than just genetic material, it held the key to the luminarii's purification process. A way to free the harvesters from their ancient programming and restore them to what they once were. That's why they want Nova so badly, Dr. Patel realized. Their masters must know what this pod contains. If the harvesters were freed from their control. A deep vibration ran through the ship, interrupting their revelation. Navigator Reed's voice came through the comm, tense with worry. "Captain, we've got movement out there. The harvesters, they've found a way in. Their ships are changing, adapting to the sanctuary's environment." Captain Winston's expression hardened. "How long until they reach us?" "Minutes, maybe less. They're not moving like normal ships anymore. It's like they're becoming something else." Through the lab's viewport, they could see it, the harvester vessels were transforming, their hulls splitting open to reveal organic components that pulsed with sickly light. They were adapting, becoming more creature than ship, reaching out toward the horizon with tentacle-like appendages. "They're not just coming for Nova," Renata said, understanding flowing through her connection with the creature. "They're coming to destroy any chance of their people being freed. The force controlling them, it won't allow them to be saved." Nova's lights suddenly blazed with determination. The pod systems began to hum with power, drawing energy from the sanctuary itself. Through their link, Renata understood what needed to be done. "Nova says there's a way," she announced. "The sanctuary isn't just a hiding place, it's a tool. If we can connect Nova's pod to the sanctuary systems, we can broadcast the purification process across the entire region." "But..." She hesitated, feeling Nova's sadness, "the process will drain all of the pod's energy. Including its life support systems." Captain Winston understood immediately. "You're saying Nova would sacrifice itself to save them? To save the species that's been hunting it?" Nova's lights pulsed once, firmly. Through Renata, it communicated a simple truth. This was what the luminarii had always stood for, the belief that no species was beyond saving, that corruption could be cleansed, that peace was worth any price. "The harvesters are almost in range," Zhang reported from the bridge. "They're charging weapons." Captain Winston looked at Nova, then at her crew. The decision crystallized in her eyes. "Dr. Patel, work with Nova. Figure out how to connect the pod to the sanctuary systems. Lieutenant Valdez, coordinate with security teams, we need to buy them time. The rest of you, battle stations." As the crew rushed to their positions, Renata felt Nova's gratitude washing over her. The creature had carried this burden alone for so long, waiting for someone brave enough to help it complete its mission. Now, in humanity, it had found allies willing to fight not just for survival, but for redemption. The Horizon's weapons powered up as the transformed harvester ships closed in. The final battle was about to begin, and its outcome would determine not just their fate, but the future of an entire species. A new dawn for two species. The horizon shuddered under the first wave of attacks from the transformed harvester ships. Their organic weapons pulsed with corrupted energy, each blast threatening to tear through the human vessel's shields. Inside the sanctuary's strange space, the laws of physics bent and warped around them, making every moment of the battle unpredictable. Shields at 30%. Zhang called from her station, her fingers dancing across the controls to redistribute power. Their biological weapons are adapting to our defenses. In the research lab, Dr. Patel and Renata worked frantically to connect Nova's pod to the sanctuary's ancient systems. The creature's bioluminescent patterns had become intense, almost blinding, as it channeled energy through the pod's crystal structure. The connections are aligning, Dr. Patel reported, his voice tight with concentration. But the power requirements are massive. We'll need to divert energy from all non-essential systems. Captain Winston's voice came through the comm, steady despite the chaos. Do it. Everything we can spare goes to Nova. Rodriguez, get your security teams to the critical junctions. If they board us again, hold them back at any cost. Through her connection with Nova, Renata felt the creature's determination mixing with a deep sadness. The Luminarii had never wanted to harm anyone, even now, preparing to sacrifice itself. Nova's greatest hope was to heal rather than destroy. Another blast rocked the ship. Through the viewport, they could see the harvester vessels continuing their grotesque transformation. Living tissue burst through metal plating, forming appendages that reached toward them like hungry tentacles. The corrupting force that controlled them was showing its true nature, turning their ships into monstrous extensions of its will. They're trying to surround us, Navigator Reed warned. If they complete their circle, we'll be trapped. Nova's lights pulsed urgently. Through their link, Renata understood what needed to be done. Captain. Nova says we need to get closer to the central energy stream. The sanctuary's power is strongest there. Reed, plot us a course, Winston commanded. Everyone else, hold on tight. This is going to get rough. The horizon dove toward the heart of the sanctuary, where streams of pure energy converged like rivers of light. The harvester ships followed, their twisted forms writhing through space as they gave chase. Inside Nova's pod, the ancient markings began to glow with increasing intensity. Power systems ready, Dr. Patel announced. Nova can begin the sequence whenever. He was cut off by a violent impact. One of the harvester's organic tendrils had punctured the hole near the lab. The smell of corrupted flesh filled the air as something began to burn through the inner walls. Containment breach. Rodriguez shouted, leading his security team into position. They're cutting through. The wall exploded inward. Harvester soldiers poured through, but they were barely recognizable as the beings they'd fought before. Their biomechanical armor had merged with their bodies, turning them into nightmarish creatures that were more weapon than person. Renata fired her weapon while simultaneously helping Dr. Patel protect Nova's pod. Through their connection, she felt the creature's growing concern, not for itself, but for the humans who were risking everything to help it complete its mission. Suddenly, Nova's lights changed pattern. The pod's crystal surface began to pulse with pure, clean energy. The harvester soldiers staggered, their corrupted flesh reacting to the purifying light. Through their link, Renata understood what was happening. Nova's starting the process, she called out. Captain, we need full power now. All hands, brace for emergency power transfer, Winston ordered. Engineering, give them everything. The horizon systems dimmed as energy poured into Nova's pod. The sanctuary streams of light seemed to bend toward them, drawn by the pod's ancient technology. The harvester soldiers writhed, caught between the corrupting force that controlled them and Nova's purifying energy. In that moment, Renata felt Nova's consciousness touch not just her mind, but everyone's. The creature shared its memories one final time, not of war or destruction, but of hope. Images of peaceful worlds, of species working together, of the galaxy as it could be again. The pod erupted with brilliant light that filled the entire sanctuary. The Harvester soldiers collapsed, their corrupted armor falling away. On the view screens, they could see the same thing happening to the transformed ships. The malevolent force that had controlled them for so long was being burned away, leaving them free for the first time in centuries. Nova's light began to fade. The creature's form grew transparent as it poured the last of its energy into the purification process. Through their fading connection, Renata felt its gratitude and joy. It had completed its mission. The Luminari's final gift to the galaxy would live on. The sanctuary grew quiet. The Harvester ships drifted, their organic components reverting to normal matter. Inside the lab, the soldiers who had attacked them began to stir, their eyes clear of corruption for the first time in generations. What happened to us? One of them asked, looking at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. Captain Winston stepped forward, her weapon lowered but ready. You were saved, she said simply. By someone who believed you deserved a second chance. In Nova's pod, only a faint shimmer of light remained. But within the crystal matrix, protected by ancient technology, the genetic legacy of the Luminarii remained intact. A seed of hope, preserved by sacrifice, waiting for the right moment to bloom again. Dr. Patel's instruments detected something else, a signal spreading through space, carried by the sanctuary's network. The purification process wasn't limited to this region. It was spreading, reaching every corner of space where the Harvester's corruption had taken root. Nova did it, Renata whispered, touching the pod's crystal surface one last time. They all did it. The Luminari's last gift, it was freedom. As the Horizon's crew began the work of helping the freed Harvesters understand their new reality, Captain Winston looked out at the sanctuary's glowing expanse. Humanity had proven itself worthy of the Luminari's trust, standing up for what was right even in the face of overwhelming odds. And somewhere, in the vast depths of space, other pods waited, carrying their own precious cargo. The Luminari's story wasn't over, it was just beginning a new chapter, one in which humanity would play a crucial role. The sanctuary's light seemed to pulse in agreement, a reminder that in the darkest times, hope and sacrifice could light the way to a better future.